The New York Giants are just a couple of days away from opening up the regular season, and we have for you some key trends that could sway what the Giants do when they face the Washington Commanders. That's coming up next here on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, credential member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI, which is where you can find all of my written work. And as always, we welcome on in our Blue Crew community members, our everydayers, our newcomers, and everybody in between. And we thank you for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And on today's Locked On Giants podcast, we're going to take a look at some trends between the Giants and Washington Commanders. Now, this is based on last year, but it's always good to go back and take a look at what was done and, what challenges what was done last year might pose for this year. So we'll take a deep dive into that with some stats that we obtained through Pro Football Focus. Then in segment 2, Andrew Thomas did not practice on Thursday. Should we be concerned? We'll take a look at that and where he might very well be in his timeline. And then finally, segment 3, we're going to wrap it up with the question of who's going to be cornerback 2. And believe it or not, there might be a trend from what Washington did last year that might influence what the Giants end up doing. So that is our program for today. Again, we welcome on in everybody. All right, let's get into it. So Pro Football Focus, we did some research from their deep stats. And first off, for those who don't know, Mike Kafka was officially confirmed as the play caller. We all kind of knew that was going to be the case for the Giants. But let's take a look at some of what Washington did last season and just kind of, see how the Giants might counter it based on what they did. So we'll start off by personnel package. Now, Washington last year used 12 personnel on 24.7% of their plays, which was the 15th most in the NFL. 12 personnel, for those of you who don't know, 1 running back, 2 tight ends. All right. So pretty much the Commanders have the same personnel as far as, their tight ends. They traded out Brian Robinson Jr. for Austin Eckler. They can still run 12 personnel. Now, from the 12 personnel, the Commanders had a 50-50 run-pass split. So it wasn't as though, they put 12 personnel out there and automatically that signaled that they were going to run the ball or they were going to pass the ball. It was a 50-50 split. So how did the Giants defense do last year against 12 personnel? Glad you asked. The Giants allowed passers in 12 personnel to achieve a 123.4 passer rating, 31st in the NFL. In other words, the Giants defense last year, not very good with 12 personnel. So I would say probably expect the Commanders to use a lot of 12 personnel again this year against the Giants. I'm going to be curious to see what the numbers look like when it's all said and done. All right, continuing onward, the Giants allowed explosive pass plays of 15 or more yards on 21.4% of 12 plays that were run out of 12 personnel, 31st in the league. Not good. And in the running game, the Giants allowed 4.5 yards per rush allowed, 24th in the league. So 12 personnel last year. When the Commanders ran it, Giants couldn't deal with it. The results were just not very good. Now, obviously, the Commanders this year, their tight ends, you have Zach Ertz, who's kind of, a shell of himself. He's kind of on the back nine of his career. They also have John Bates and Ben Sinnott. So last year, John Bates played in 25 and 32 snaps in the 2 games that he was up against the Giants. All right. So that's 57 snaps total. Ben Sinnott in the first game played 13 snaps, 24 snaps in the second game. So that's 37 snaps. you will see, it looks like, a lot of the Commanders' tight ends against the Giants. Now, the Giants' defense, for whatever reason, not just against the Commanders, had problems against opposing tight ends last year. Matter of fact, it's been a kind of a recurring theme with this defense. Have the Giants done enough to shore that up? Well, we're going to find out, obviously. All right, a couple more stats I'm going to share with you. The key matchup to watch on third down for the Commanders is going to be Terry McLaurin, who last year, 40 targets, which was tied for fifth in the NFL, had an 89.1 receiving grade, fourth according to Pro Football Focus, and averaged 18 yards per reception, which was fifth. So Terry McLaurin, a.k.a. Scary Terry, he's going to be the guy to watch on third down. No surprise there. He's their number one receiver. He's a favorite target of quarterback Jaden Daniels. He's going to be the guy who I would expect the Commanders go to. Now, the question becomes for the Giants, who's going to cover him? Now, on a prior show, I think I mentioned to you that Paulson Adebo, the CB1 for the Giants, he has primarily played one side. And the question has come up, will he travel with McLaurin? I think he's got to. I mean, I would be shocked if he doesn't. Now, that being said, there becomes the question of who's going to be CB2, which I'm going to talk about a little later on in the program. But McLaurin is a key matchup on third down. And, I mentioned Zach Ertz before on the tight end. Zach Ertz, who is expected to play in this game, in cases when Washington goes and has a fourth down, Zach Ertz has been their go-to guy. Zach Ertz last year targeted 8 times, which was 5 more than any other player on fourth down. He had 7 receptions, 8 yards average per reception, and 89.5 receiving grade on fourth down, which was 7th amongst wide receivers and tight ends. The Giants' defense on fourth down last year, they allowed a 62% conversion rate versus 11 personnel. So not very good there as well. The Commanders, there's no reason for them to really change things up. All right. It's a case of, okay, Giants, you know what we do. This is what we do best. Now good luck trying to stop us. All right. So that's going to be very interesting to see. Now, I'm going to give you a couple of stats here from the Giants' perspective. Russell Wilson, in terms of man coverage versus zone coverage, he has been much more efficient against man coverage. And Washington, what do they run? Or what did they run primarily last year? It wasn't man. No. They ran zone coverage 70% of the time versus a 26% of the time man coverage. And then the other percentage is just, like a hybrid, if you will. So that's going to be an interesting battle to see. How does Russell Wilson fare if he sees a lot of zone coverage? All right. So those are some statistics that I thought I would share with you ahead of the game. We'll see how it all plays out. And of course, we'll do an analysis and see, what turns out to be what when we do the recap of the show on Sunday. I guess it'll be Sunday night. We'll do the recap. So we'll have that for you. All right, Giant fans, coming up next, Andrew Thomas did not practice on Thursday. Does that mean we should panic? Did he have a setback? I'll tell you what I think right after this. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the daily fantasy platform that lets you turn your football predictions into real rewards. The NFL regular season is here, as is college football. So whether you've got your eye on big name quarterbacks or breakout running backs, Prize Picks makes it easy to get in the game. Prize Picks is simple to play. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections. And if you get your picks right, you can cash in and win up to 2,000 times your money. I've used Prize Picks for a while now, and I love how simple it is. The flex play option is a total game changer. Even when one of your picks misses, you still can double your money. And Prize Picks puts their members first so that all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. Download the Prize Picks app today and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. Prize Picks, run your game. Hey, Giant fans, this is Mazda's Moving the Game Forward, brought to you by those who believe it's not just about playing the game, it's about redefining it. Because these moments do more than win. They push what's possible. They remind us to go that extra yard, shift into that extra gear, and keep moving the game forward. And with it looking more and more as though left tackle Andrew Thomas might not be ready for this weekend, the Giants are already counting on backup tackle James Hudson III to keep things moving forward, both on the ground and in the air. Hudson might not be the same quality of player that Andrew Thomas is, but he's been a steady presence at left tackle all summer and into the preseason, and he has the full confidence and backing of the coaching staff. When you follow what moves you, the unexpected is only the beginning. And just like there's more to every highlight, there's more to a Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to Locked On Giants. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, and I have a special bonus episode coming up for you that I'm going to run on Saturday. I had an opportunity to interview Eli Manning. Now, the reason why I don't have it on today's show is it was part of a promotion that Eli Manning is involved with, and I was given about 15 minutes with him. So we talked quarterbacks, and who better to talk to about what Jackson Dart is going through than Eli Manning, who back in 2004, of course, was a first-round draft pick that the Giants acquired via trade, and Eli had to sit for a little while. And so we talked about, what goes on behind the scenes in terms of how a young quarterback is prepared, even though he's not out there playing, and a few other things. And then, of course, Eli is going to tell us about the promotion that he's involved with. So that's going to be a special bonus episode on tomorrow. That's going to drop probably in the afternoon. So I hope you will check that out. All right. So that being said, let's get into segment 2. Andrew Thomas, left tackle, did not practice on Thursday. And as you heard, if you listened to the Mazda commercial, I mentioned James Hudson III is going to probably fill in for Andrew Thomas. But let's talk about where Andrew Thomas is, and should we panic about exactly where he is in his rehab. The Giants will tell us that this is all part of the plan. All right. Aren't you tired of hearing about all these plans and just how they work out? Because look, the best laid plans never really turn into, work out the way you expect them to. That being said, I'm not surprised that Andrew Thomas did not practice on Thursday. He was limited in Wednesday's practice, which was a full padded practice. I did not think he would practice on Thursday. I hope maybe he would, but the question with him is the soreness that he is feeling after a practice, is it the good soreness that comes with getting into football shape and being hit, or is it bad soreness that comes with the injury still not right? Folks, I do not believe Andrew Thomas is going to play on Sunday. I don't know necessarily that that's a bad thing, because the Washington defense, I think the Giants should be able to deal with them. Washington's defense, to me, especially their defensive front, not as strong, I think, as it was a few years ago. So my best guess with Andrew Thomas, until he is able to put together consecutive days in which he practices in full, including one of those days being a padded practice, we probably won't see him. Now, I don't want to get too far ahead, but I don't think we see him next week against the Cowboys. And you know what? I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. And here's why I say that. Micah Parsons is not on the Cowboys anymore. If Micah Parsons was out there, I would say maybe you want to try and push it, see if you can get him out there. But that Cowboys defense, right now on paper at any rate, it doesn't scare me. And I question how much it scares the Giants. So if the Giants have to hold Andrew Thomas out for, 2 weeks, isn't it better to do that? Because really, if you think about it, the Giants should be able to stay toe-to-toe with Washington. They played them close last year. They should be a little bit more competitive with Dallas than they have been in recent years. Where you want to have Andrew Thomas available is when you get into the meaty part of your schedule, which, to my mind, week 3 against the Kansas City Chiefs on Sunday night. that's where you want to have Andrew Thomas available, because that Chiefs defense is a little stronger. Chris Jones is on that defense, obviously. And then the following week, you want to have him available for the Chargers, and just keep on rolling at that point. Hopefully by that point, he is good to go and you no longer have to manage his reps, although I think they are going to continue to manage his reps. So, I know there are those of you out there who say, no, we want Andrew Thomas out there. Why take any chances? Well, folks, they're not going to put him out there if he is not 100%. And I know, some of you will say, well, he'll go out there and he'll get banged up and bumps and bruises anyhow, and he won't be 100% the rest of the year. And that's true. That's true. No player is going to be 100% for the duration. But I think what they don't want to do is they don't want to have a setback with Andrew Thomas. And if it means being a little extra cautious, and this is what the Giants medical staff is, by the way. I know a lot of people say, oh, the Giants medical staff, why can't they get these guys back on the field quicker? Because the medical staff is extremely cautious. They would rather err on the side of caution than to rush a guy out there and risk making an injury worse. Have there been instances where maybe you can argue that that's happened? Could be. But that could also be because the players weren't being totally honest with the medical staff. Maybe they were saying, oh, I feel better, and they were hiding something. I mean, it wouldn't be the first time that it's happened. Players generally they downplay injuries because they don't want to miss games. They don't want to appear weak or whatever. Andrew Thomas, to his credit, has been very open and honest about where he is in his recovery, what his expectations are. When we spoke to him last week, he did not sound optimistic. So you got to wonder, okay, is he still hurting? Is that foot still bothering him? And, so if they give him another couple of weeks, because remember, this will have been 3 weeks now since he was activated off PUP. His teammates have had 6, 7 weeks, 9 weeks, whatever it is, to get into football shape. So Andrew Thomas, in a way, is catching up with the rest of his teammates. And isn't it better to be cautious with your most valuable asset than to rush him out there and he has a setback and now he's done for the entire year? That would be catastrophic, folks. So I think we have to be patient with it. We've got to hope for the best with James Hudson III. Like I said, the coaches have confidence in him. He wasn't horrible for them in the preseason when he did play. So fingers crossed, I guess. I know it's not the ideal way to go into a season, but that's where we're at right now. All right. Coming up next, cornerback 2. Who is it? Shane Bowen spoke to the media on Thursday, so I'll tell you what he had to say, and then I'll tell you who I think is going to be cornerback 2. That's coming up right after this. Hey, Giant fans, it's almost the weekend, and it's time to look back and acknowledge who delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash streaks that save you more every time you order, for the New York Giants, was there any question that last season receiver Malik Nabers delivered time and again and in a big way? Nabers was a bright spot amongst the dismal season last year, and with his rookie campaign under his belt and having had enough rest to be full go on Sunday when the Giants visit the Washington Commanders, Nabers is ready to deliver again for Big Blue in a big way. And just like Malik Nabers delivered for the Giants, DoorDash delivers for you for your Saturdays. With DoorDash streaks, you save every Saturday you order. Stack it all up all season, and you could save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday and keep the streak alive. Fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply. Promo period ends on November 18th. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to Locked On Giants. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. And in case you missed it, the Giants Squad Show debuted on Thursday. It was hosted by Jay Berman, and it featured myself and former Giants cornerback Mark Collins. We did a live stream, and it was a really fun discussion. We covered all kinds of topics, some of which, we touch upon here a little bit on the show, but, we went into a little bit more detail, and Mark Collins was excellent. He gave a lot of insight from a NFL player perspective, which, is always good to have on a show. So do check that out. It should be available on our YouTube channel and also wherever you listen to your podcast. Again, it's the Giants Squad Show. And the Squad Show will be back on Sunday after the Giants Commanders game. All right. It's going to be hosted, I think, by Jay Berman, but the panel is going to be a little different. I won't be able to be on it. And I don't think Mark Collins will be on it because we both have post-game responsibilities for other outlets, but you'll get that. And then, of course, I'll have the regular Locked On Giants podcast for you after the game, just as soon as I can. So that's what's coming up. And I hope you will tune in. All right. Cornerback 2. Let's talk about that. Is it going to be Deonte Banks? Or is it going to be Cor'Dale Flott? Shane Bowen was asked that question. Wouldn't say. So he was also asked, would you consider rotating the guys? He said, probably not. He said he's never really done that in the time that he has been a coordinator. And quite honestly, that doesn't make sense to do if you think about it, because, if you're going to rotate a guy based on whether you're anticipating needing to play zone coverage or man coverage based on what the team is going to do, the opposite team's going to do, you can't really predict that as much. You need somebody who ideally can do both. All right. So we'll take a look at the competition, who did what, and why I think, well, I'll tell you who I think it's going to be after I give you the stats. Okay. So based on the Pro Football grades from the preseason, Cor'Dale Flott and Deonte Banks, both of whom missed practice time and game time, so they were kind of even. Flott finished with an 85.3 grade in zone coverage. All right, that was tops amongst the Giants cornerbacks. Banks, 53.8, which was 7th out of 15. Now, here's the thing, folks, and this is a point that Mark Collins made on the Giants Squad Show. When you play zone coverage, you're facing the quarterback, right? You're basically backpedaling and you're keeping an eye on what's in front of you. Whereas if you play man coverage, your back is often turned. All right. Now, we have seen with Deonte Banks a problem or a lack of consistency in him turning around to look for the ball. So you would think, theoretically, it would be easier and he would be more, proficient in playing zone coverage because all you have to do is backpedal and keep your eye on what's going on in the offensive backfield. That has not been the case. So that said, Banks becomes almost like a sitting target for Washington to attack. And I just think my gut feeling is that Cor'Dale Flott will get the starting nod, and Cor'Dale Flott will see most of the snaps at cornerback 2. Now, the question, like I said earlier, will Bowen have the cornerbacks travel? Ideally, you don't need to do that. If you've got a cornerback who can play both and play it well, you don't need to do that. Paulson Adebo can play both well. All right. Flott, he plays zone a little bit better. But do we really want to see Cor'Dale Flott go up against Terry McLaurin? No, I don't. At best, I would want to see him go against Deebo Samuel, because Deebo Samuel, to me, probably not the same player he was when he was at his heyday with the 49ers. So the Giants' defensive backfield, in a nutshell, I'm still concerned about that group. All right. I think they're going to be fine at safety. Obviously, I like Tyler Newman. I like Javon Holland. I think the two of them will be fine. I'm okay with Paulson Adebo. I think he'll be fine. But that cornerback 2 spot, the fact that they really don't have one guy who can do both zone and man equally as well, that's a concern. That's a concern. So I'm very curious to see how Shane Bowen is going to play it with the cornerbacks. Because look, if the Commanders get the passing game going, it's going to be a long afternoon for the Giants. I mean, the last thing we want to see are those deep balls. We don't want to see those explosive plays. The Giants got to get that under control. And, 3/4 of the defensive secondary, I think, can get the job done. I still have my doubts, again, because those two guys missed time and neither really jumped out and made the job their own. So fingers crossed that Shane Bowen has a plan and he's creative enough to come up with a way to mask what I view as a deficiency. But, who knows? Maybe I'll be pleasantly surprised. I hope so, certainly. All right, Giant fans, before we say goodbye, a couple of reminders real quick. Don't forget, tomorrow I'm going to have a bonus episode with Eli Manning, my interview with Eli Manning. Now, just a heads up, the terms of the interview that I did, I'm not allowed to use the video, but they are allowing me to use the audio. So I will play you the audio, and I'll try and give you something of a video as best as I can for those of you who are watching on YouTube. But you will hear from Eli Manning. Really good interview today. So do check that one out. And also, folks, NFL fantasy draft season is here. So for your next listen, go find the Locked On Fantasy Football podcast with hosts Vinnie, Iyer, and Michelle Magdziuk. Listen every day to prep for your fantasy draft and become the most informed manager so that you can take home your league's trophy this season. Find Locked On Fantasy Football on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. All right, Giant fans, that's it for me. I'll see you tomorrow, and then we'll be back again probably Sunday night after the Giants-Commanders game with reactions, takeaways, all the good stuff you've come to expect here on the Locked On Giants podcast. Until then, have a great weekend.